How's it going, everybody? Thank you for stopping by to this week's CEO Barbecue. As always, for a disclaimer and honest confession, this is not a sponsored video. I don't get paid for interviews, but this is, however, a private discussion. It is not meant for public broadcast. And either one of two things is going to happen very soon because I really like this company and I will either take them on as a customer or I will buy shares of them. Both things will not happen simultaneously because I do not buy shares of companies that are paying customers and I do not take on companies as customers if I own their shares. But so just so you know that I'm definitely biased on this one, okay? And I'm not to be followed. I am not a financial advisor. None of what you're about to hear is financial advice. And a lot of it will contain a lot of forward-looking statements, dreams, hopes, and a lot of ifs and buts. So please do your own research and don't blindly trust talking heads on the internet, okay? With all that said, though, Nick, thank you for investing in time with me today.
Well, thanks for having me on, and very nice to meet you.
Yeah, same here. I'm absolutely looking forward to this. Now, I've heard a lot of great things about core assets from Dr. Henny, so I sort of want to go into it. It seems like you have some, it's a big story in the making. It's what it seems like. So let's figure out if that's the case. And actually, maybe we can start off with the things that I can tell you what I know about your company, what I don't know, and you can add some things to it. A few of the basic facts that I know from reading your presentation and stuff like that are that you're a $25 million Canadian exploration story. It's very early stage exploration. You're out of BC, Canada. You have 100% interest in the blue property, which is over 100,000 hectares. So it's huge. It's about 1,000 square meters plus, 1,000 square meters plus, actually. And that's up in the Atlin mining district, if I got it correctly. That's up in the high north, so it's up on the border with the Yukon territory, almost.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, and then you just recently released some results. They were definitely not bad. A lot of there's a lot. It seems to be a lot of value in the rocks that you've collected this summer. But they were rather short intervals. So maybe we'll talk about that more in depth later on. But basically, what I'm getting from all this is that you're a copper, zinc, silver, cobalt story, if I'm not mistaken. Broadly said, precious metals and base metals. So that I know. What I don't know though is why you pick those metals, Nick. So did you specialize in those during your studies, or did you just stumble upon this property and now you're working what you've got? How did that come together?
Yeah, so I guess one correction I guess goes back to the beginning there, but it's 1,000 square kilometers, right? 1,100 square kilometers, not square meters.
Did I say square meters?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, yeah.
you convert it there from hectares to, but anyway, nonetheless, very large property. And no, I didn't pick. I don't pick the commodities. The Mother Nature is in charge of that basically, and they kind of I went up there and found them, but it certainly wasn't a choice to find zinc, lead and silver. I actually went up there initially. It was the first time I went there was actually in 2017. And what I was doing is I was looking for energy metals at the time. And the company that I was working for, they basically had me as doing project generation for them. And our idea was to get ahead of the green energy curve, start looking for things like lithium, cobalt, copper. So I spent a great deal of time, probably about 6 months, studying this Atlin mining district area. And I was looking for cobalt. That was the primary. So I actually came across a thesis that a prospector actually directed me towards, a local prospector in BC. And it was actually in 1948 it was written, and it was a Bachelor of Science thesis at UBC. And it basically outlined, it was looking for cobaltite in volcanic rocks, basically on porphyry, well-known porphyry belts. So this student went up to this area where there had been an old adit driven in actually 1890 was when that was driven in the area. And there was X number of a magnetite copper rich skarn was excavated there, and actually it was mined, and it was, I don't know how many tons it was. There's no documentation on this, no pictures or anything, but this student went in and the goal was to do petrography on it. So basically microscope work to determine how the different minerals are tied up. So they had in this report that there was 3 meters of 3.1% cobalt. So that's a very high cobalt number, especially if it's not a vein hosted type thing. So I was studying up on cobalt, mainly looking at magmatic type deposits, but also vein hosted deposits. I was trying to figure out which one would be the best route to go. So after reading this, myself and a colleague and a friend of mine went up, and we basically ground truth our properties before we stake them, and just try to see, like, is this idea a good idea? Because a lot of these reports can have errors in them. Sometimes the geochem is transposed incorrectly in spreadsheets, and you can see a number that's off the Richter scale, and then you get there and there's no way it can possibly happen. And when you've been at it for a long time doing prospect generation, you find these things out. There are little things where you can't get too excited too early. And I learned my lesson the hard way in that, because I read some papers back in the day and kind of staked before I went in ground truth. But with this one, we went up there looking for this cobalt showing, and what we found was way higher copper than they ever sampled. And I didn't find a whole lot of cobalt. More background. Anything less than, say, 500 ppm will be considered pretty low cobalt, right? You got to have over 1,000 ppm to kind of be in the game. So when I sampled, I got all these samples back, and they were like, I was getting 10% type numbers copper, and that was what started getting me excited. So after that, we staked a small postage stamp area, and we continued to sample this area privately in a private company. And we all decided that it was a good idea that we should list this company in a publicly traded market, and we chose the Canadian Securities Exchange. And that basically leads us up to when we listed in 2019.
That's a good overview. I appreciate that. And it's also very interesting to me, especially with like young CEOs and young undertakers in general. It's mostly because I can be like that sometimes with my personal business affairs. But I can get really excited about like a business idea, and I think like okay, this is the best one yet. Okay, it's a hole in the market. I'm gonna make it, and I'll start working on it just to figure out quickly after that it wasn't as good as I expected, and I'd have to put a lot more money and a lot more work into the idea, or sort of let it die. And so one defense mechanism that I've sort of built into that the thinking process of mine is to ask myself, if the idea is really that good, how come nobody else is doing it? So let me throw that question to you, Nick. How come nobody else picked up those hectares before you did? I guess, like, why do you think you're the chosen one here?
Yeah, I mean, that is a good question. And I mean, the simplest answer to it is just because I went there, basically, is the answer. And right now, with the world we live in right now, everything is electronic. And a lot of people actually make their living off of just staking claims and never actually visiting them. They can bend these into companies with doing minimal work. They can sit down in their pajamas and basically do these desktop studies, never ground truth them, and still sell them. But this area in particular is unique because it has every ingredient you can possibly think of to make this a porphyry skarn CRD, which is carbonate replacement type deposit. And why did nobody recognize this? I think mainly because of glacial cover. And if you don't have, you can do your geophysics and all these different techniques all day, all night, and you can get colors on a map, right? But if you don't have a reference of what those colors mean, it's really, that information is kind of useless, right? So until these glaciers were scaved off, and I was able to actually sample these areas that may be geophysically attractive, it doesn't mean anything until you do something like that. But again, this area is one of the oldest mining districts in BC, and it was a part of the Klondike gold rush. So a lot of the people, men and women who traveled up from Vancouver or Hope, BC towards the Klondike, they stopped off in different areas along the trail, and Pine Creek, which is located in Atlin, ended up being one of those areas. So there was a point in time where there was about a population in Atlin of about 10,000 people. So there was a lot of people coming in from all over the world, the United States, Europe, just everywhere basically. So it was a booming mining town. Now that dates back to about the story starts in kind of 1890. That's when the whole story starts. And then we're going to fast forward here to 1948 would have been the next time someone went in there. That would have been that student. And then we had about 5 different exploration companies that were in the area. One of them was Caminco, Hobo Creek Mines, Cantex. There was also Falconbridge in the area.
Carmac.
So all of these companies were up there in about in the 70s. And what happened, from my understanding and from my reading, is that the government proposed the whole area, like a very substantial area, to be a park, which is now known as Atlin Provincial Park. And I've been speaking to the old timers in the area and some of the people who work for Caminco, and they're still around. They're in their 90s type thing, 80s and 90s. But they told me that, and this has been documented, but they got the government and UBC to do a prospectivity analysis of the area to make sure, they didn't want to turn something into a park that could be, of economic interest for the province and the country. So if you look on a map, there's a very irregular shape of this park. It's kind of disconnected, and the very, very abnormal polygon lines. So one would ask, like, why would a line change like that? Like, why is this park and why isn't this park? Like, sometimes the answer is someone just drew this up on a computer, right? Sent it off and nobody argued it. So they just make it a park. That's generally how it works. But in this particular scenario, someone put up their hand in the town meeting in Atlin and said that this was an area that needs to be looked at further before they make it a park. So it actually took about 5 years for both the UBC and the government to get this prospectivity analysis put together through a couple of different professors that were working at the university. And what they came up with basically was that, this was a prolific area. It was, a very, very prominent structures there, all the right ingredients in the Stikine terrain to make this area very desirable for spending capital. So between those 5 years, though, these exploration companies, they basically counted that as a loss. So they didn't do any further work, because you don't want to spend money on something that you can't have, right? So all of these companies let all of their claims lapse, and nobody ever went in there again after that. There was no other staking besides a couple of little postage stamps here and there. But what people don't realize is that this is a hotel job, right? Like the accessibility of this project is crazy. I mean, you can get down there in a speedboat in 30 minutes, and it brings you 500 meters from the Laverdere, which is the original occurrence that was found in 1890. That occurrence itself, you can walk into that in 20 minutes from the lake. And then the Silver Lime area, which is home of the 2021 Grizzly Discovery Monto, that one's about 10 kilometers from the lake. So, helicopter time, we've been using helicopters right now, and it only takes about 13 minutes to get to the property. So it's really no different than if you had to drive 5 or 6 hours, out into the interior of BC to get somewhere, right? We're in the hotel where we got heat, light, all the different services there. So it's not really out of the way,
Mm-hmm. No, I'm happy that you mentioned the Silver Lime property, though, and you were also talking about the companies that have previously been there. One of the showings in the Silver Lime property was found in the 90s, right, by Carmac Resources. I think they reported some grades on it, and they were not bad grades either. So how come they never found the porphyry that you're looking for?
So, I mean, we have not found the porphyry. We need to make that for sure for investors. Our goal is to track these occurrences back to a porphyry source. That is our goal. So that would be a big success if we can find the porphyry, of course, especially in
but that's what I was asking. Like, how come you haven't? I mean, how come Carmac Resources did not find the porphyry that you're looking for? How come they didn't find it if they were targeting this in the 90s?
Yeah, so what they were after is vein-hosted deposits. So they were looking at mainly quartz and the different metals associated with quartz veins. And everything we know about vein-type deposits versus CRD deposits are veins or fracture fills, right? So they're not always continuous, and they can vary in grade with depth and width, and sometimes they just end out of nowhere, and you don't know where they go. But what you did say that they had some respectable grades. They had some crazy respectable grades. They had a 2 meter intercept channel sampling across one vein there that was about 4,500, so 4.5 kilograms of silver. So they were getting tasty results, man. Extreme, and then there was about 5 other elements, including antimony, copper, lead, and zinc. Lead and zinc combined greater than 25%. So these were Hollywood numbers, but again, they're thinking size. They want to look for size, and if you only have a 2-meter vein and it's discontinuous, then you're not going to get that kind of size. In addition to that, this CRD type model wasn't actually even really proven until the 1990s. So they were in there prior to really knowing what a CRD was. So much like when I first went up there, I didn't know anything about a CRD 6-7 years ago. Nothing at all. I didn't learn anything about them in school. So I saw these white, limestone beds, and then I was finding massive sulfide, what I was calling pods at the time, coming up between fractures and basically replacing limestone. But I didn't know until I went home and started studying what that meant or what it was. I had no idea. I knew about MVT deposits, which can also have replacement in limestone, but they're much smaller type deposits, still with lead, zinc, and silver. But I had no idea that CRDs were related to porphyries. And the fundamental reason why you can get a CRD and why you cannot get a CRD is all about the host rock. So if you do not have limestone on your property, if you don't have a permeable and very porous, very favorable unit of limestone, calcium-rich unit, you cannot produce a carbonate replacement deposit. And that is the main reason why everywhere else down in the Golden Triangle doesn't have these carbonate replacement deposits. So fundamentally, they didn't know what they were looking for at the time. They didn't know what a CRD was of 100%. They knew about replacement, but they did not understand that these structures these massive sulfide occurrences are, typically, if there's no post mineral faulting, they should be continuous all the way back to the source. And that makes them, that's a game changer when it comes to, how desirable an exploration project is, because you don't want to be spending tons of money running after a discontinuous, a centimeter width discontinuous structure. You can't waste your time doing that, and you don't want to waste shareholder money. But with the thesis that we're using, which has been proven multiple times and it's worldwide known, all of these things should be continuous, and they should also be geochemically zoned with regards to the porphyry source.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I think this definitely clarifies it. And at the beginning there, you said that it's important for potential investors to know these things. And I thought, he's right. Let's clear it out of the way. Maybe the obvious things. Let's get them out of the way first before we dive into it a little deeper here. What's the main goal? Like, how do you plan on making potential shareholders money on this deal? If I were to become a shareholder, is that cash flow or transaction? What do you plan on doing?
Well, so we are an exploration company, so we're not a miner, of course. So our plan is to, I've got right now, as far as I can look ahead right now, is about 3 to 5 years. This is going to be a very detrimental season, obviously, because our thesis is that these things are continuous back to the source. And we have over 250 occurrences that are separate occurrences within this 6.6 by 1.8 kilometer radius. And from what I have been reading, this is like pretty much unheard of, and especially to have these pristine showings that have never been mined, because in Mexico, for instance, some of these things get mined out in the 1600s by mom and pop operations, and it wasn't until the 1950s that major companies came in and drilled down through these things and found out that these things are like a network of channels. It's like a root system beneath the subsurface. So even to find a centimeter of massive sulfide, which we would call a bleeder, at surface, that would be like a big, even for a major company, that's a really good sign. So the thing that we're seeing occurrences from centimeter scale to over half a kilometer scale of continuous sulfide, that means that there is a big system happening here. But to answer your question, I guess why would you invest in this company? And it's for the scale, and it's for major companies right now are looking for mine life. And if you have grade and you have mine life, your mine life is going to come out of your porphyry side of things, because that's usually your lower grade, higher tonnage. Yep. And then your carbonate replacement, that is like that's the cat's pajamas when it comes to massive sulfide, right? You're talking 90% plus sulfide. So the profitability and the metals budget on these CRDs can be absolutely, catastrophic if you can connect the dots on these things. So the goal of our season this year is going to be to test our thesis of things being continuous all the way back to the source.
So that's, now you're speaking of 3 to 5 years of work before you can transact the assets, or because that's what I was asking. Like, do you plan on eventually mining this yourself if you find something, or do you plan on transacting the assets?
Yeah, we do not, like I said, we're not miners. We will not be mining. Core Assets won't be mining the property. We're specializing in the prospectivity analysis and getting this thing. We'll get this thing to a resource stage, a feasibility stage, and hopefully, if we're lucky enough to have everything work out, because oftentimes, it's up to Mother Nature. What's beneath. What we can see at surface is obviously substantial, and separating from other projects. It's not a dream anymore. It does exist. Like, you and I can go there right now and pick the metal up off the ground. It's a tangible item. So that's obviously puts you ahead a nice bit of some of the other deals I've done in my lifetime. But yeah, we would hope to try to do a transaction with a major company, or bring partners in at some point. Once we get that value to where we need. Right now we got about $3.8 million Canadian in the till, and a lot of our things like drilling and geophysics and our hotel for the summer, a lot of these things have been paid for already as well, or at least a portion of them as a deposit. So our cash position right now is quite strong for our program this year.
Okay, but so you say you're no miners. Okay, that's clear.
Right.
What you're doing is, you're trying to transact this. But that's also not something that you personally have done before, though, right? So who's in place that will assure this going smoothly eventually?
Well, I've done a ton of transactions in my day,
Okay.
like probably 50 to 100 different transactions. I've never done a transaction with a major company. So that is going to be a new thing for me. And honestly, I mean, every day I am doing new things that I have never done before throughout this whole journey. And I did my undergrad as a geologist, and then I transitioned into more investment side of things. I did another business program since then. So I'm learning just like you are really every day here on how to bring this thing forward. And I'm sure I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm trying to do everything as right as I possibly can. And the main thing is just not making mistakes twice. You try to mitigate how many times you make those mistakes. But doing a deal with a major is extremely exciting for me. And if I get to that point and I'm able to actually do that, I do have enough people around me. I have a lot of good people surrounding me that have far more experience than I do, and that really helps, because I've got the energy to kind of drive this thing. But if I want to pick up the phone and ask someone a question, I have someone for every single different part of a transaction, or mining or exploration. I have someone I can pick up and call those people, and they're more than happy to help me. So I think that's a bonus for sure.
I think it's a bonus too, and I'm happy that we're talking about your board, because about your connections, because that brings me to your board. And your board has an interesting color to it. And I gotta say that I had to look more into it, but now that we're talking about it, it will become clear what I mean. But so, anyways, you're paying what I think is a lot of money for services to Zimtu Capital. There's a lot of connections in there on their board, your board. And so a lot of your board members are from there as well, if I'm not mistaken. But so you're paying $12,500 a month for the next 12 months. I think it was not for the next 12 months from now, but I think up until the summer or something like that. So what are they supposed to do for you? Like, why do you think that investment is worth it? How did that came to be, and what's going on there, Nick?
So, well, I guess back to the beginning of things. So Zimtu was the company, the investment company that actually hired me on. And it was the reason why I moved out from the East Coast to work here. So the Core Assets Blue property would not exist without the backing from them, because I had no money at all at the time. And they wrote that first check, to get me up there and to kind of start our journey along the way here. But The $12,500 a month actually is a really good deal because that's where my CFO is getting paid, also secretary, and then I have a whole back office and an office place in downtown Vancouver that provides me with social media, news release dissemination. There's 4 IR guys there who are making calls for me, keeping investors updated. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not much at all. It's a very, very cheap price, especially, it pays for all those, including the CFO, and our CFO is great. Like everyone who's on the team is very hardworking. And I think, I could be incorrect, but I think we probably have the youngest team out of any other CSE listed exploration company. I'd be pretty safe to say that. I think we have an average age around 30, 35, 36 years old. So it's a very young team.
Mm-hmm. No, it's I appreciate that overview because as a potential shareholder, you see these things, you see these amounts, and you start asking questions because sometimes you would see these amounts being for the rent of a logo or whatever, which is just the company diverting funds from shareholders. So I gotta ask these questions, and
Of course.
you've pointed out a few times that you're really about the rocks, right? And so it seems on first glance like your rocks are worth being about. And so I just wanted to make sure that nobody is sort of taking advantage of you, right? And this indirectly of me as a potential shareholder. So in that line of speaking, can you maybe also tell me a little bit more about your deal with Crescat Capital as well? Because and by the way, it's not that I don't like Crescat. By the way, I'm well acquainted with Tavi, Kevin, Max, and Dr. Henny. Of course, so shout out to Crescat Capital, like great company, great team. But you've gone into a deal with them as well, in which they gave you what did they give you, like a couple of $1 million, I guess, or was it a 1.2? I'm not sure anymore, but
yeah, 1.2, yeah.
1.2, right? But you're now obligated to involve them in every capital raise, something like that, such that they always keep at least 3% ownership in core assets. Like, am I getting that right?
As long as they keep 5% of the company, they have the right to purchase further future financings for 5 years. And so 3% is incorrect. I think that was in the initial news release, but 5% is the actual. If you look into the actual hard terms, but with Crescat being a part of this, it's actually a double good thing, because not only are they providing me with capital, they're also providing me with knowledge. And they're always there. They're another group that are always there for me to pick up the phone and call. And a lot of the advisors and all these different people that you might have around you to help you, they're only helpful if you actually use them, right? So
Yep.
You'll see a lot of companies bring on advisors just for their name, and they might never call them and ask them questions, but I like to call these people, and I like to actually use them. If they're going to be a part of my team, I want them. I don't want just their name. I want their knowledge, type thing. So Crescat brings both of those things, and so far they've been extremely helpful. I'm always there to lend an ear, and it's only been about a month so far, but I'm in contact with them, basically a couple times a week, and I bounce ideas off them, and they ask me questions, and I need that too, because I'm 30 years old and I got so many questions. My notebook can only take so many, at a time, and it's great to have a diversified group of people. So someone who thinks both a geologic way and a marketing way, if you can merge those two things together, that's like that's the best you can have. And back to your original thing that you said there about me being about the rocks, and I am about the rocks, but it's hard not to be about these rocks when you see them, because unlike a lot of these other deposit types, like gold deposits that are disseminated gold, these things are they're just very, very good looking rocks. They're very sparkly, very metallic, and you can look at one and you can easily see the zonation of where the zinc is, where the lead is, where the silver is. And I've never been a part of a project like that in my life. So just to be able to be there, stand on these pristine outcrops that have never been documented before, I mean, that's a very special thing. And if only investors could, get out into the field and experience these things, because it's way different looking at the pictures versus living it. it's a real spectacular, it's a very spectacular thing to come over just a random hill up in, where it looks like there's snow forever, and then you just come upon a very purple colored outcrop, and you hit it with your rock hammer, and you're just like, this is massive sulfides. And there's no better feeling than that, right, as a geologist.
I can only imagine. I see this as an invitation. So eventually I might take you up on it and come up there and try and hit some rocks. But no, I definitely know how you feel, especially when it comes down to, being young, and having Crescat Capital over there. So, because you say they're providing a lot of things, well, they're providing you with Dr. Henny, right? I mean, I get it. Dr. Henny has been a great help to me as well. So I absolutely get it. But anyways, back to how you're going to sort of make me money on this and how probable it is. This sort of that part of the barbecue here. That's the part that I really like. Do you expect to go through much share dilution before you can get there, though? I mean, right now you have over 77 million fully diluted shares. 25% of those is in warrants and options. It's not a small overhang. It's nothing huge either. And no, you're a huge shareholder, so you like keeping the share structure tight as well. But that's at a market cap of what is it, like 25 million Canadian? As I said earlier, yeah, about 25.
We're at about 30 million. 30.
Oh, you're at about 30 today. Okay, yeah. Okay, so but this, if you had to give me your most like sort of realistic guess, how much more money would you need to raise before you can monetize something for shareholders? In the next 3 to 5 years.
Well, I mean, it's that's all going to be obviously price dependent on where the stock goes. Unfortunately, it's not something I can control. There's obviously, geologically speaking, there's a lot of things I can't control. One thing I can control is the way that we execute our programs, and who we bring on to do our work. So everyone that we have is a young and energetic team. So I'm saving money every step of the way here, just due to my team right now. But with regards to dilution, I mean, we will have to go back into the market. I mean, exploration companies don't make money, right? So we will have to dilute the company, and that means it will also be diluting my own ownership, which is not great. But I'm trying to come in on each round as well myself, if I'm able to. But 3 to 5 years here, where we are going to have to raise a large chunk of money, and that will all be dependent on our success this year. So if we get a few good drill holes this year, we'll be raising another 2.5 to 5 million by the end of this year. And again, depending on, we don't know where the price will be or where the global markets are, for that matter at that time. But to bring a project like this to life, it's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of drilling. There's going to be many issues along the way. I tell people ask me, is there going to be any issues? And I say the issues haven't even had a chance to start yet, right? Like, until we get that drill up on the ground there, we have no idea, right? It's all so many different things that can happen. But to bring a CRD porphyry project to a feasibility stage, it's going to take $100 million to do that, right? It's just realistic, and it could be a plus 100 million on top of that. It's not cheap, but you need to think about the grand scheme of things here. Okay, what is the goal, right? The goal is to sell this thing, and CRD projects don't go for $100 million, right? They go for billions of dollars. Okay. And if you can find the porphyry, if you have the porphyry and it's mineralized on your property, that just trumps basically everything. Right, you're looking at huge mine life, and then you get your high grade gravy on top through the CRD. So these things can go for multi-billions of dollars. So why not spend 500 million when you can make multi-billion dollars, right? Like there's nothing else that compares to that kind of increase in value. And keep in mind, to date, right now, I think we've only actually raised 3.5 million Canadian, and where we are already, like, very unheard of to have this many boxes checked by an early stage company with less than 10 million US dollars, right? It's unheard of. So, and it's all thanks to, it's not anything specific that I'm doing. It's because all of this massive sulfide is visible, and, we're taking a prospector's approach here. There's nothing that's right at this point. There's nothing very complex about it. It's if there's massive sulfide, you sample it, and you basically look at it on a plan view map, and you can see geochemical zoning, and the geochemical zoning tells you, are you closer to the porphyry or are you closer to the end of the CRD? And the goal is to basically bridge the gaps and work two ends against the middle type thing, right? You're trying to either work your way back to the porphyry or vice versa. So we've got a lot of tools that are helping us that are free, right? It's very inexpensive way of vectoring towards these things.
Okay, yeah, and you say you're not doing, this does not depend on you. I think it does. I mean, I think you're cutting the expenses. That's what you've proven me so far that we've spoken. You're not buying fancy suits, right? There's a lot of CEOs out there who prefer fancy suits. So that could be one way of cutting costs. And sort of talking about that, actually, do you feel comfortable at talking about your own salary or compensation plan as a CEO?
Yeah, no, not at all. Well, I pay myself like $8,500 a month right now, and I am going to. I like to set kind of milestones or goals for myself, and if I don't like make a change in the company, whether that be market cap wise or money in the bank, I don't really feel like it doesn't like increasing your salary should be something that you're excited. It's a milestone type thing for me. The more money you make, you should be producing something to make that money. There should be a reason behind. There should be a quantitative and a qualitative reason why your salary is what it is. So I do plan in this new year to increase it a little bit because putting in a fair bit of work, and the company has been growing. But in addition to that, I've put my own money into the company and created a quite a large share position. I have about 5.2 million shares of the company, and I paid for all of those shares, and none of them were free in any way. And then, of course, there's some options along the way. I might have 500,000 options of the company, and we'll be doing some option incentives along the way here. And then we also have an RSU program as more of a kind of like a way to incentivize some directors and consultants and whatnot as well. So we'll be doing that now, maybe later this year or something like that. But right now I'm just like anyone really with regards to investing. Like I go into the core asset stock every day, and I want to buy it. I want to own it every day. And once you spend time on something like this and you bring it from the very beginning to where it is today, it's like having a child. Like it's hard to actually want to sell your stock. So you don't really think about the stock is just something that's in the background, and you don't think about it day to day, right? But you always want to be buying more, and there's sometimes when you're restricted and you can't, and that even makes you want to buy it more. So and then when the stock price drops, I get people calling me and wondering why it's going down, and I don't know. I never really know, right? I'm in there as well, and I'm wondering when can I get it for the cheapest,
Yeah, no, absolutely get it. And I share your opinion with you deserve getting paid. You've 10x'd the ground since you've been with the company. Essentially, that's what right? That's what you thought about 100 square kilometers, and then it's now 1,000 plus. So you've done a fair bit of work, as you see. And you also have a lot of people on board who also do a lot of work. They've been compensated as well. Some of them have been compensated with shares, though, and so I do want to talk a little bit about that, at least, because obviously they're subject to the 4-month plus 1 day holding period. But I'm sort of trying to figure out the guys who are getting the shares, the guys who are holding your shares with Zimtu Capital and so on. I just want to figure out what they're planning on doing with the shares and their options and their warrants and just the whole shebang, because if I don't know what they're planning on doing, I cannot control what they'll be doing either, just as you cannot control these things. So, if they're in there just for a quick buck, get in and out, that could result in a massive increase of supply of your shares, and thus it could crash the stock price. So what do you think their intention is with the company, Nick?
Well, I mean, just like anyone now, I mean, there's individuals who have been accumulating large amounts of stock in the open market, for instance, with core assets. And who is to say that tomorrow morning, someone, John down the road doesn't wake up in the morning and say, I want to offload, some stock. I can't control that, right? It can happen from anyone, and I would have no way of knowing. But Zimtu in particular, they have been there from the beginning. They built this company, and as a part of us being partners together, we kind of have an agreement where, you know, they let me know what they want to do, and I let them know what I want to do, and we're team players. So they had a large share position because of that, and also we haven't really done many 4-month and a day type holding agreements. When we listed this company, we did a NOP, which is a non-offering prospectus. So we didn't actually raise money as an IPO. We did NOP. So as a part of that, there was there's 6 lockup periods that all of this stock is locked up, including mine. Any seed shares are locked up, and there's still, I think, I don't know, 30% of those shares are still locked up, and the other 66 are free trading. But you know, I kind of consider those shares a part. You know, we're all in it together type thing. And you know, if they do need to make some money at some point, then the company is doing well. There's good liquidity. You know, there's no reason why people can't make money. I mean, we are in this for, you know, to make money and to bring things to the next level and make other people money. Mainly, right? We're in it for the shareholders. We're not doing it for free. So yeah, I mean, I trust them and everything that they're doing. So far, they've been mostly just buying. But with regards to options, I mean, the options are there for people to make money. You know, if you're only getting paid $5,000 a month, I mean, it doesn't really pay for your life in Vancouver. It's not easy to live here with the current costs. So again, it's a handshake agreement on the options as well. It's like, please let me know, you know, so that way if we're trying to do a financing or this or that, you know, I'll say no. But otherwise, I want people to make money, and I want people to be happy with the way the share price is performing, and I want the shareholders to be knowing that the management is actually getting compensated as well, because that's very important as well. Many different people look at it in different ways. You know, some CEOs pay themselves a ton of money, and then they have less shares, and then there's the other people who have a lot of shares and get paid less. Like, who's to say which is the better route? For me personally, I like to just take a moderate salary, and I like to own a ton of the company. That's what I like to have, because then you're committed to it. It's, you know, you approach things in a different way for sure when you got skin in the game, and you know, I'm the captain of the ship right now. So if the ship goes down, I'm going to be the one at the end of the day who's holding the bag type thing. So that basically lights a little bit of a fire under you to you know, try to move things ahead as quickly but still efficiently. You know, you don't want to move too fast. You want to kind of take your time, but at the same time, when you're dealing with the market, you know, the market doesn't want to wait for you ever, right? So you need to find a happy medium somehow to try to make, you know, keep the shareholders informed, which, you know, we try to get a news release out every 2 weeks. You know, not to say that it's always going to happen, but, you know, so far we've been, I think, providing the public with great updates, and we're going to continue to do that right till the summer. So.
I like that, and I agree with you. It seems to me like there's a lot of people on social media who feel like CEOs should not get paid or whatever. Or I think that's wrong. I think CEOs should get a fitting salary, you know, a salary that's not too high, but also a one that's not too low. You know, you got to be motivated to work on this. Having extra shares and options obviously helps, but you still got to, you know, you got to pay your expenses. I'd rather you not having to worry about, oh, where am I going to pay my rent from this month? I'd rather have you worry about the rocks. You know, that's why that's at least how I look at this in my limited experience. That's how I think about it right now. So I'm perfectly fine with what you just said here. And I think that's enough grilling.
And I mean, produce results, right? And then, you know, sure, reward yourself if you're producing results, and you'll feel good. You feel good yourself that way too. You know, like it's a win-win for you. You know.
Yeah, definitely. And as I was saying, I think that's enough grilling on the topics that you normally don't like talking too much about, because you're all about the rocks, and I like that. I like companies that have a strong technical team. So let's maybe do a little bit more digging into that topic specifically. You mentioned a lot of it already. You said a lot, so I took some notes and I want to go off them right now. So you're looking to explore what is known as a CRD porphyry project. And I just very recently learned what a porphyry is to begin with. Basically, it's what Dr. Henney tells me is that it's oftentimes a large mineral deposit that's geologically and economically friendly, but it oftentimes has lower grades in its core. But looking at some of the samples that you took with your diamond blade saw last summer, I saw the pictures; it looked great. But this porphyry, this possible porphyry, is not suggesting any low grade. So if you had to explain it to someone like me, someone with a case of being dropped in his head a lot as a kid, in the simplest of terms, what is the CRD part of your porphyry about, and why does it matter that it's specifically CRD?
So again, that question brings you back to fundamentally what is a CRD. And CRD, like I said, stands for carbonate replacement. So you are replacing a rock, and it's a neutralization reaction is what it is. So same thing as baking soda and vinegar. Your baking soda is your base, your vinegar is your acid. If you put your acid into your base, it will basically, dissolve the base, which would be the baking soda, until it, has no further acid properties that it can't eat any further through the baking soda. So with our porphyry is our intrusion. So CRDs are intrusion related. So there has to be a source coming up, has to be a porphyry. You can't have a CRD without a porphyry. Once these pulses come up and they start leaving the original intrusion, then they either hit a non-reactive rock or a reactive rock. If you have a non-reactive rock, you're going to get what we know as veins coming up. And we'll get mineralization, and it could be little veins, big veins, who knows. But if you get limestone, what you're going to do is you're going to replace these dead bodies, and it's all about the amount of heat and the force of the pulses that are coming up. That's how you get a big, large CRD. So when you hit your limestone bed, it'll keep going continuously, following the road of least resistance, usually coming up, beginning in fractures, and then it takes its own shape within that body, all due to porosity and permeability, of course. But the CRD and the porphyry are two separate things. Every CRD does have a porphyry, but the porphyry is not always mineralized also, right? It could have all of its fluids expended, but your CRD is your high grade part of the system. So you're getting all of your metal deposition that is 90% plus sulfide in your CRD. And then at the end of the day, your porphyry may be copper molybdenum bearing, but it's going to be, a resource on a porphyry is usually less than 0.5% copper type thing. Sometimes a gold credit, and then you get a bit of molybdenum in there as well. But you're moving a lot of rock to excavate a porphyry, and that's why it's nice to have. And that fundamentally, that's what costs money, right? It's building roads and moving rock. Water, using water. So porphyries are both not very cheap to explore for, and they're not really that cheap to excavate. But the thing is, there's so much of it there that you can make that mine life, and the mine life is what comes into importance here. If you're not going to go in here looking for a 10-year mine life, right? Like that's just not the idea here. So if you can go in and find this porphyry and say you get a 50-year mine life on your porphyry, if you add the CRD to it, your CRD pays for the porphyry, right? Like that's how you offset your costs. You get your silver will pay for your zinc, and your zinc will pay for your lead, and so on and so forth, right? It's just because it's so high grade. So that's the cool part of having the CRD with the porphyry. It just changes the economics on it, crazy amount, right? But with regards to the geology and everything, I'm like I said, doing a prospector approach on this thing, and now I have people who are way smarter than myself hired on to take care of, all of these different alterations and geochemical zoning and all this different stuff that I speak about. I know less about that than the people who I have hired on now. And, these guys are porphyry specialists and CRD specialists. So they know that's their thing, right? For me, I can talk about it all day. I've spent a lot of time in the property, but if you wanted to dig deep into the technical aspects, I wouldn't even be the guy for that, really, right? I know enough just to be dangerous,
Okay, no, I like that. I recently I do a weekly show. By the way, I think I told you about that on email, and I spoke to Dr. Henny last week about mineral deposits in general. And so he gave me a list of 5 mineral deposits to look for when I'm looking into precious metals companies. And so he mentioned paleoplacer deposits as some of the best deposits to look for when it comes down to precious metals specifically. Do you think that the CRD deposit is better than a paleoplacer, or like, can you compare those?
Well, I wouldn't. I don't know a whole lot about paleoplacer or placer deposits, but I do know a lot about CRDs, of course, and I do know that CRDs and porphyries are the largest mines in the world, and they are moving. We're moving towards a greener future here right now, and you want to be looking for deposits that are hosting metals that can actually bring us forward and can actually do something for, say, electric vehicles or what have you. But if you're looking for a gold deposit in BC right now, gold alone, I mean, you're not really adding to that global energy transition. So one would think that it would be harder to put something in production that is just gold right now. So with us, we do have a gold credit potentially, in what we're looking at. But I don't think you can really beat a CRD deposit with a mineralized porphyry. I just don't think there is anything even comparable to it. And then you're bringing in your silver and your copper, very two buzzword, metals right now that everyone's talking about, whether there's a real reason behind it or not. But, it's nice to be looking for something that's actually adding to this transition versus just, gold mining type thing, right?
No, I agree with that. Absolutely. And why I'm asking about this is well, obviously partially because I want to know more about the blue property specifically, but also because I'm just interested in learning more about each deposit for my other investments. So I'm sort of banking on your knowledge there. I hope you don't mind, by the way. But so what, this sounds overly positive. If you have a CRD with the porphyry is mineralized, it could be huge. Okay, great challenge, maybe, but then you have the CRD, I get that. But what could be a problem with these type of deposits? Like what could be a total deal breaker for it? Like what is something that you wake up on Sunday, go to church praying for that you don't encounter on that journey of yours?
Well, I mean, when you get to the point where I am right now, all you do is look for reasons why it can't work. Basically, that's what keeps you up at night. You're just trying to think about all the different issues that you may or may not encounter. Why is the zinc so high here compared to one of the world-class mines in the United States? Like why is our zinc higher than theirs? Like, because it's hard to fathom when you're at, if you knew everything, obviously, I wouldn't even be here right now, probably, right? I'd be doing something else. But you're just always trying to look for flaws. But from what I know from CRDs, and again, everything, just like you, I read a lot, and I'm learning a lot of this stuff by paper. And then when I go to oftentimes when I come back from the field, that's when I actually learn about what I saw. I don't actually understand it when I'm there. So from all of these, all this literature that I've been reading with regards to just the CRD portion, separate from the porphyry, it's that all of the elements in a CRD are metallurgically docile. So they basically intermingle with each other easily, and they're not tied up. They're not very tied up together in the crystal structure. So you can separate them easily, and this has been a proven thing. Also with CRDs, generally underground when you're mining these things, and then you eventually will get to your porphyry, which if it's close enough to surface, you can open pit it. But what that means is that you're doing less superficial disturbance, and that's a really good thing in BC. And you can also drill from underground with these things. You kind of follow where you're going visually very easily because you have a white rock versus a jet black rock. So anyone can that's why these things can be artisanally mined, because even just a random person going down the street can notice the difference between, okay, this is black and this is white, so it's pretty easy to follow. So that makes it a really good thing. But at the end of the day here, I mean, we will have to, if we are, continue to be successful, we will start doing, bench tests and metallurgical work to see how these minerals are tied up with each other. And we'll know more then about is this, because at the end of the day, it's like you get the ore to the smelter, and then you're going to get dinged for some different, what we call gang elements. And then you'll make less money basically at the smelter. So we're still too early stage to know exactly what kind of elements could be in there that could hurt us. But I mean, the geochem right now, arsenic, for instance, is generally a bad one, especially when it's associated with gold. We don't have any arsenic in our deposits, which that's a normal thing for a CRD. It's not unique to what we have, but just as an example, that could be an element that you might worry about at a mining project. But so far upon our results, which has no indication of what's beneath the surface, but right now it looks relatively clean.
Definitely, and you say that could be a problem. That could be a huge problem, arsenic, in terms of maybe not as much in terms of the geology as it is a problem on the internet. Like, you get the word arsenic associated to your company on the internet, and you're done. Pretty much. No, I've seen people get aggressive about it. What did I see? Somebody on Twitter say something like, it was about a company that I follow, and they said, like, if somebody ever mentions this company to me, I'm instantly blocking them because they're promoting arsenic or something along those lines. Like, people get aggressive about it. Anyways, you
we're trying to. I was going to say, like, we're trying to mitigate our risks, with the minimal experience. I've got about 10 years experience, I guess, in geological aspects, and then 5 years of management financial experience. And I've learned a lot in that time. And one thing is to kind of take care of anything you can early, So sometimes some things that we've been doing as a team at Core Assets is, we're taking water samples before we disturb anything, just so we have some, because a lot of these places you go in and you don't actually take the sample until you start disturbing things, and then your background could be skewed. So we're sampling the water now to see, what were the background levels before we start, ever disturbing anything. That's one thing that we're doing, just as an example, to kind of mitigate things that way. And then, in BC, generally it takes a couple of years for the government to request, say, a wildlife survey, but we've gone ahead and just done it, just get it done. And just little things like that can go a long way as well. Just trying to stay ahead of the curve. It might cost you an extra $5 or $10,000, but if you're getting ready to drill and someone stands up and says, listen, you're polluting the water, or there's wildlife in the area, you got to do a survey, that would ruin my whole summer. My summer's done. I basically have to then hire on these people when they're available, which is, it's getting increasingly hard to get people to even do jobs like that. So we're just trying to get some of those things out of the way early on. And, I think that's a great approach, really.
I definitely agree. And you did say that it's too early stage to know what you have there, but you do have some indication, right? Because you just got some of the grades back. You recently reported some results that came back from your summer adventures, I guess. What did you think of them? Like, what did you like? What did you expect to come back better? Or like, because I know the market wasn't too happy about it, because your stock is down about 10% since that. So what's going on there, Nick?
So I thought the results were off the Richter scale good, and in comparison to any other, if you can even see these CRDs at surface, right, that's already crazy. Like, people need to understand that there is like in Canada, we have a building called the CN Tower. It's about 560 meters in height. So we have a CN Tower on its side in the form of a massive sulfide manto at surface. Like, it's there and it exists. So it's already pretty crazy. But the goal of the channel sampling was to show people that our samples were not of selective nature, because generally when you go out, you look for the shiniest rock to take your grab sample from. But when it comes to channel sampling, you can't do that. You're doing 50 centimeter composites, so you have to take everything that's in that 50 centimeters has to go into the bed. So you're always going to get lower numbers when you do a bulk sampling, versus just a selective sampling. So the goal was to show that, and we basically nailed it. We showed that all of our samples were just properly taken from the carbonate replacement body. But fundamentally, you need to understand the difference, which we've already gone over at the beginning, between a CRD replacing a rock versus a vein filling, right? So with carbonate replacement, everything we know about them is that they should, theoretically, they should get larger as they get closer to the source, and they should get higher grade. So that's why it's so significant, even to get a centimeter of say 20% zinc and 50 grams to 90 grams silver. That's a huge deal, even for a major company, because it's at least you're into the mineralization. And if it's continuous, you should be able to drill it back to the source. But yeah, that's basically the take home on that. With veins, they can, pinch and swell and be discontinuous. There's a lot of companies out there right now that have over $100 million market caps, and what they're after is veins. And it's very easy for an investor to just only see the elements and the numbers and not know about the deposit. So that would be one of the most important things, I think, is knowing what type of deposit the company is drilling. That would be fundamentally very, very important, because then you know what types of numbers to see versus other types of projects. And a porphyry versus a CRD, obviously you're going to get way less numbers. Your copper number is going to be lower in your porphyry generally than your CRD. So you need to have that distinction as an investor for sure.
Okay, that does make sense. But you just made the difference between the sampling and the actual drilling. So I do like that. But you also have drilling planned there, though, right? You've announced that. So what's the latest on that? Who's going to do it? When does it start? How much of it do you plan doing? How deep do you plan going? That's also interesting. Just what's your general strategy for this drill program? And I guess also, how much money do you think it's going to cost?
So that question is going to be answered in a news release here in the next week coming up. But I can touch on some little parts of it. We do have a drilling contract now, so we are locked in for that. Right now, we're looking at 5,000 meters, but we are going to drill until we can't anymore. So we're going to be up there from the 15th of May till September 15th, and we're going to try to push it if we can. But again, like I said, when you go into these exploration projects, first go drilling, you don't know what the conditions are going to be like in the subsurface. So you can run into all kinds of problems, and even an hour down, that could be 20 meters of drilling, could be 10 meters of drilling, and then we're drilling a large core size, so it's HQ core, which takes longer to drill, but it gives you better recovery, and that's the reason why we're doing it. But what was the other question you had there?
You said you have a drill contract, so and this question is going to make sense. But I was just thinking, what type of drills that driller on your contract is going to use? Because I want to know how deep you're going to go. Like, are you going to go really deep on it, or will we just be trying to drill the mantos basically?
So the goal of this season on the Silver Lime project in particular is going to be, tapping into these at the subsurface. So you're going to be looking at holes on the Jackie Chimney area, for instance. That target is a little different from Sulphide City. So at Jackie, we'll probably be doing 250 to 300 meter holes there at Jackie, and just again trying to step out a little bit every time to prove the thesis that these things are continuous and again zoned with regards to the source, and increase in grade, hopefully, as they go with depth. When we get over to the Sulphide City area, which is we still don't know exactly where the porphyry is, and we're still actually going through all our geophysics here, trying to match things up. So there's a lot of questions in the air, but we'll probably, the deepest hole we'll do is probably around 650, 700 meters. So that is the maximum the drill that we have can basically go with HQ core. So we will be doing at least one deeper hole over at the Grizzly Monto zone. And then summer comes earlier at the Laverdiere. That's actually below the tree line. So you can get in there in early May if you want, and stay till even the 1st of November sometimes. So we might go in there and maybe test some of the porphyry targets there, so that they would be probably around 600, 650 meter holes as well. But we're not going to be doing anything over 1,000 meters or anything like that in this field season. We're going to, like I said, it goes back to the prospector approach. You can get tangled up big time with the technical part of things as a geologist, and you see the mineralization, but you don't want to drill the mineralization, right? You want to go away from the mineralization and then come back into it or something. When a prospector would be like, listen, I can see it there, I'm going to step back a little bit, tag into it, and then it's just practical. It's it's a different approach, a prospector versus a geologist, and you need to find a good medium between both ways to go after these things, right?
Yeah. Why I ask you about the depth is first of all because that question makes me look smarter than I really am, and also, also because I'm just thinking, what if you don't hit the porphyry right from the beginning? Because what if it's really deep? Don't you think that maybe that's if it's not as shallow as you expect, then if you don't, let's say that you don't hit bonanza grades, which probability of that seems rather low right now after what you've reported, but if you don't hit the porphyry, you don't hit the grades that you're hoping for, the market is heavily going to discount your stock, and it's going to make it harder for you to raise money for a deeper drill program, right? So how do you see that strategy there?
Yeah, so I mean, with regards to the porphyry, the 2022 season is not aimed at tapping into the porphyry. Could we stumble upon it with a 600-meter hole? Certainly could. But the goal is not to attack that. It is to attack these carbonate replacement showings that we can see at surface. So that is, I guess, the straightforward plan. Obviously, we never know what's going to be in the subsurface, and these channels can anastomose. They follow the path just like an animal would in the forest. It follows the path of least resistance, right? So, but a chimney versus a manto bodies are blanket-like bodies that are generally horizontal, and your chimneys are generally vertical or kind of subvertical. So if you can if you don't step out too much, you should be able to, once you tag into that system, you should be able to continue to figure it out. If you know the geology in the area, because it comes down to the limestone bed, right? You want to get into a thick part of the limestone bed, and at our property, we have 60 kilometers by 40 kilometers of superficial limestone. Your limestone is your lowest unit, or that would be your oldest unit there, and then all of your volcanic rocks are going to be on top of that. So the idea is to pierce through the volcanics where there are volcanics, and then find out how thick this carbonate sequence is, because you need to have room for these things to grow. That's very important. More limestone is really good for CRD. You got to have a lot of it.
Yeah, and that's your what is that in your knowledge? That's your baking soda, right?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes I make sometimes something wrong happens in my brain, and then I get it. Not on purpose though. But so the strategy that you're talking about, attacking the chimneys and the mantos first, is that did you come up with this, or is this something that others have already tried when they're targeting the same type of deposits, Nick? How does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, again, most of the things that I do are from, I'm borrowing techniques that other people use, and I'm tailoring them to fit what we're doing, right? So that is a very normal technique to attack the CRD and then try to work your way back to the porphyry, right? But some projects won't have any superficial mineralization of CRD, but they will have limestone, but they may have a porphyry near surface. So then they start working from the porphyry back to the end of the CRD. But we're lucky enough that we have a little taste of everything. We're all over the spectrum here. We got our lead zinc rich areas, our silver rich area. We even have a distal gold rich area. And then we have a copper and molybdenum rich area. So we have a little bit of everything there. And you can just picture it as a dotted line. And the drilling is going to basically be in the middle of these dots, and it's going to try to connect them and try to bridge these gaps, so we have a better understanding of what we're dealing with. And keep in mind here, this is early exploration at its finest, and this is a discovery story. I don't know of any other massive sulfide occurrence of this kind of magnitude that has been discovered at surface and never even touched before. I don't really know of anything since kind of Voisey's Bay type days. So it's quite substantial. And again, if you can get up there this summer, I'd love to have you up there. Hopefully COVID and everything is working out. But if you could get up there, I think that's one of the another important thing too, like, have you, as an investor, it's like, have I ever been to an exploration project before? Have I ever been to a mine? Do I know what a mine looks like? So if you go on a property and you've never been at a mine before, I mean, you can pretty much, you can tell pretty quickly if something can actually go into production just by being at other mine sites in the world, because there's a lot of different things that go into these to putting a mine in production that people might not think of if they've never been to one, right? And with carbonate replacement deposits, I've never been at another carbonate replacement deposit in my lifetime, and there's not a lot of documentation of. So part of what I've been trying to do is trying to see what these things looked like before they were mined, but these things were found back as early as 1600s. So there's no photos like I have of what these things look like. It's just holes in the ground everywhere, right? So it's hard for me to be like, what is this thing as special as I think it is? Or, it hasn't been done many times before, but it seems the pictures I've been sending people who have been to all these projects, they seem to think that this is one of a kind. And you can tell a lot by actually just looking at an exposure of mineralization of these things. You can actually see zonation of pulses, of how many pulses of mineralization came out. And the more pulses, the more heat you get from these things, you generally ups your metals, your metal budget, and that's why you get higher grades. So I think a question I get often is like, why is our grade so high at surface compared to, say, places in Mexico? And I think it's due to the glacial action, and the glaciers have actually scraped off all of the lower grade material that's been leached out, and it basically has it brought down to very high grade material. So we hope that it'll continue, back over that 6.6 kilometers. That would be quite the treat.
Okay, yeah, let's hope about that. What are you completely permitted to do whatever you want? Like, are you at complete liberty to do whatever you want there this summer? Do you have all the permits, or how should I look at this?
Well, you definitely can't ever do anything you want, but within reason. I guess this is another thing that I kind of like to do personally to mitigate risk. But generally, I'll try to actually permit a project for drilling sometimes before I even walk on it. I won't even go there. I'll just try to permit it and see, because you never know these days, right? So when I did that technique with the blue property, so I've actually permitted that multiple times now for drilling, and I just did it to make sure I could, type thing, right? So right now we have full permitting for the Laverdere target, and also for the original silver lime target. And then what we've done now is we had news out probably 3 or 4 months ago where what we're doing is we're converting it to an area-based permit now that our property's so big. So then with an area-based permit, you don't have to notify the government every time you want to move a drill a couple meters. You can just go ahead and drill. So right now we're permitted for both the Laverdere and silver lime. But what we want to do is have this area-based permit so we can kind of be free to move whenever we want. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, but you just said you're gonna release some news shortly. Is that when we're gonna know how much it's gonna cost?
Well, I can tell you how much it's going to cost right now. The budget right now for our 5,000 meters drilling is about 2.7 million Canadian dollars.
How much do you have left in the bank? Because I think a couple of months ago it was like about 3 million, and then your burn rate is at what, like 600K a year. So how much do you have left?
So our burn rate's about 55 grand a month during obviously the non-expiration season, because that's when you spend all your dollars. But right now we got just over 3.6 million Canadian in the bank. And then keep in mind that we have 6 million warrants that are priced at 15 cents. So they're big time in the money. And none of that 6 million have been paid for yet. And on mid-March, I believe it might be around March 17th, they change in price from 15 cents to 25 cents. So I do expect to get, it's safe to say we'll probably get another 500,000 in from those, anywhere between 500,000 and 1 million. But we're seeing cash come in from those daily, right? So that'll be an extra little boost for us as well.
Okay. No, 500,000 seems like a good amount of money. Almost cover your burn rate for a non-drilling year. So that's okay. What are the next couple of news that I should be looking forward to? So you're going to be announcing that, the details on the drill program. What are the next couple of steps for Core after that? Are you going to specifically focus only on drilling this summer, and we're just waiting for news on that, or?
Yeah. So what we did last summer is we kind of broke everything up into phases, and that way you stagger your samples. Your samples go out to the lab different times, and they come back then hopefully in a suitable order in a way that you can present it to the market, and make sense of it all, right? But right now, in a couple of weeks here, we'll have our drill contracting, and we also did a last kind of round of grab samples, and we were kind of focusing on the copper side of things, which wasn't the initial aim, was the silver, and then we're trying to again work the two ends against the middle. So we targeted some interesting copper, visually interesting copper areas. So we're going to report some of those numbers coming out. Then we have that 2,000 line kilometer VTEM survey, which is versatile time domain electromagnetics. So that gives you a very high resolution heliborne survey. We did that last summer. That information has come back, and now we're trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. Like I mentioned to you, like it was colors on a map, but now that we're getting all of our data coming back, we're going to create those layers and try to see like what does this mean in the grand scheme of things. So we'll do a release on basically putting everything together, the big picture, I guess you could call it. And that was a property-wide survey, and very instrumental for, especially if you can't find mineralization, but we obviously do have mineralization. And in addition to that, there's a couple little extra things that are going to be there for sure, which I'm not going to mention at this time. But other than that, it's going to be your classic permitting, mobilization of the drills, and whatnot. But you can expect to see one about every 2 weeks between now and June. That's generally the way I like to keep it. 2.5 weeks.
Interesting times, and I like that you're updating the shareholders a lot. But yeah, interesting times in front of you. If you achieve what you're hoping for, this will greatly shape your future, I think, and likely that of your shareholders too. So I do wish you the best of luck. Really, I do. And it was great talking to you about Core. Really, I think you're a smart guy. You know your rocks. So I appreciate hearing from you, and I appreciate your time, sir.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And again, at the end of the day, it's building the credibility, I think is the most important part. And I think that the most valuable thing I can get out of this is, basically the whole process itself, and just learning more about, what the investors see, and how to present those things to the investors. That is fundamentally pretty darn important when it comes to your share price.
I do think that's true. Well, and actually, you know what? I just mentioned that to you, but do you mind, before we close this off, to sort of help me out with some of what I like calling geology for investors? Do you have like another, say, 10 minutes or so?
Yeah, sure. Let's roll.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. So here's an easy one. Not losing any of your time. You're a PGO, which is a professional geoscientist, if I'm not mistaken. What do you think are like the 3 most important geological concepts that an investor should understand if they want to sort of increase their probability, their chances of not having to lose money on resource stocks like I do?
Yeah. Well, I think throughout our conversation, we've kind of touched on a lot of those things. I guess to start off, terminology is pretty important. I try to make things as personable as I can, and try to stay away from heavy geologic terms. But again, we're lucky enough right now that everybody has the World Wide Web, and you can type any term into Google and you get an answer instantly, right? So just knowing your terms, and not being afraid to click one window closed and open another one, and just do a little bit of research on things, right? It might not mean anything to you when you begin it, but once you start putting these pieces together, and then you start, learning from what you see, just like I do in the field. I, go in the field, and I sometimes don't learn until after I go home. So that would be one thing for sure. Just the terms and the lingo, I think would be very important. And then another one that we touched on was like, get out there, and actually go to a mine site, go to an exploration site, and see what these things look like. Because again, you don't see, if you're just reading all the time, you don't get to actually experience or know what is good. Is this abnormal? Is this something that CEO is saying that this is the largest superficial expression of a CRD? Like that can't be true. Like what are the superficial expressions on this one, that one? And then when it comes to mining and metallurgy, I know we spoke offline earlier. I was telling you I don't really know a whole lot about metallurgy, right? But I do know all the terms, and I know the lingo, so I can carry on a conversation about it. But understanding how minerals intermingle with each other, I mean, that can makes or breaks a project. So that's very important. And then I guess, yeah, it goes back to the question that you asked me regarding deposit types. So if you are looking at a company that is going after a vein type deposit and they come out with a very small intercept, do you get excited over that or do you not? What is a typical number that you should be looking for on both the width, strike length, and grade of a vein type versus a CRD, right? CRDs, channel sampling of CRD, for instance, isn't really doing the same thing as channel sampling of vein. Channel sampling of vein, you can basically measure the structure of it. You can, tell what the strike length is sometimes, and the width is pretty important. But with a CRD, channel sampling of CRD is not really showing you any size. It's only showing you grade. So that's the only thing you're focused on when you're channel sampling a CRD, because again, remember, they're coming up structurally through fractures and then just taking the form of the rock through the neutralization reaction, right? Which a vein does not do. A vein does not replace, it just follows the fracture. So if you can measure your fracture with a vein, then you'll know your azimuth and your dip. Now it can still change when it goes underneath through the deformation, but with a CRD, you can't do that. You can't measure the dip of a say a chimney in a CRD can change as it goes beneath the surface, and it can get larger, extremely larger, and higher in grade. So yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, just understanding different deposit types and what their associations are with the different geological units, the grades, the different techniques that you would use with a CRD versus trying to hone in on a magmatic sulfide deposit. Because you and I can both pick up a nickel magmatic sulfide ore and also a zinc lead rich ore, and they might have similar weights, but what is the fundamental difference? Where were they derived, right? So all those things are important, I think.
No, I think those are three great points. So just to go over them again, and I sort of have some follow-up questions as well. Terminology, I think that's a very, very important one. What I do, and I also host this on my website, is that each week I'm trying to learn about a new concept, a new word, a new something that has to do with mining terminology. And I keep a glossary of mining terms on my website. So I would archive them and do it like a short description, a written one. And then I'd also include the video where, oftentimes like last week I had Dr. Quinton Henney, and I have the luxury of him explaining all these terms directly to me. But so I try and learn one new term each week. And I've been doing this for what now, 7 weeks, I guess, since the beginning of the year. And your knowledge really increases greatly. And you can just follow up a glossary like that. The SEC offers a glossary of mining terms. So if somebody wants to be quicker and do like a word a day or whatever, I think that's pretty daunting, but could work for some people. You can go onto the SEC or just look it up, glossary of mining terms, SEC. They have a website. It's on there, pretty easily explained. And then you can go ahead and look into the words more in depth. So that's about the first point. No. The second point, though, you say visit an exploration site. It sounds great in theory, but how am I supposed to do that though? Like, I again have a luxury of having access to a lot of people like you. You pretty much invited me to your exploration site this summer. I'd be happy to. We got to see how we can make that happen. Hopefully we can. But what about the people sitting at home, not knowing anybody in the mining industry, just getting into it? How are they, like, can they walk up to a college, university? How should they even start on working towards visiting an exploration site?
So it's definitely difficult. It would be difficult. Higher end, sophisticated investors, they will mandatorily go to the project before they put money into it. But it comes out of they got to pay for it, right? So for people who are investing, smaller amounts, $1,000 here, $1,000 there, how do they do that? And the answer is that it would be very difficult, but two ways that you can kind of experience the same thing is, YouTube, for instance. I've been to probably 20 CRDs now in my life because I have YouTube. So I've been following different people on there, and you get to see it and firsthand. Another thing you can do is generally every province has a prospectors and the prospectors development kind of association, and all of these guys are just they're normal guys who have day jobs, and a lot of the time they just prospect on the side, right? And And like where I come from, Newfoundland, and I know that all the prospectors there, if you call them up or you get involved with this prospectors association, they'll come pick you up and take you out to the project and for free, and they'll spend a day with you. So, you only get as much as you try to get, because if you don't ask people questions and you don't contact people, you can't be afraid to send someone a LinkedIn message that you don't know, and maybe you only get 1 in 10 answer you, right? But someone will answer you. And there's these people are very, they love prospecting, it's their hobbies, and they like sharing it with other people. So especially for early stage stuff. And there's a lot of mines that are in care and maintenance and stuff that the public can visit, or X mines, something that was in production in the 1900s or whatever. So there are ways to do it. It just all depends on how driven you are, I guess, to get up and just start asking people if they'll take you out, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess you could also send like an email to a university and ask them for some sort of an organization around you that's doing these things. Say that you want to learn more, say that you want to get into it. There's a lot of these things, about any topic really. So I had expected to be there for geology as well, and also just expand your personal network. I think that's great. You should not be afraid to do that. Definitely not in our day, like on Twitter. Put up your name, put up your picture, LinkedIn as well, connect with some people, send emails. You'd be surprised how many people will actually answer your emails. Like I'm a nobody as well. And I'm talking to you. I'm talking to Dr. Quinton Henney. He answered my emails, and he's been quite helpful. So no, I do like these tips. What about the third thing that you said is learn more about different types of deposits? So that's what we talked about last week on Sunday with pretty much yesterday with Dr. Quinton Henney, about the different deposits. So he gave me sort of the basics of what is a mineral deposit, what type of deposits should I be looking for, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of those deposits. So there's a quick, a short summary on that onto resourcetalks.com. But is there a specific place, like a website, a blog, or a book, or something that you say, pick up this book on mineral deposits, or something that I can further my research in, Nick?
There is, it's been a while since I've kind of been in university and whatnot, but we had several books when we were in university that were, Canadian economic mineralogy, and also deposit models in these books. Can't tell you the exact name of these. It might be as easy as, the Canadian metal deposits or something like that. But I think I think the internet is your best way. I mean, you can really find yourself, you can get yourself down a rabbit hole pretty quick looking into these different deposit types. And, if you can't, again, you just don't want to focus on just what the metal is. You don't want to focus on just what the percentage of the metal is, or the widths. You want to put everything together. Like, you can show a geologist just what the elements are of a certain project, and they can narrow it down to probably 2 or 3 deposit types pretty quickly. You add grade to that, they can probably bring it down to 1 or 2. And then as soon as you get a lithology in there, then you can kind of get an idea of what kind of deposit you could be dealing with, So it's just putting all 3 of those things together, the actual element, the quantity of that element in there, and the geological aspect. Put those 3 things together, and you can really do a lot of damage for sure.
Yeah, that sounds great. And then about the rabbit holes, I think that could be a dangerous one too, because I find myself being interested by pretty much anything. So I'd go and I want to learn a lot more about geology, but the thing is, you also have to, at least in my position, you have to approach this as a retail investor. So you got to know geology as an investor specifically. Like, maybe you're not going to, if unless you're pursuing a PhD in geology or whatever, you want to learn more. Obviously, that's different than being a retail investor. So I literally looked up geology for investors a few days ago, and a book popped up. So there's a book called that. I found a free PDF online, I think 140 pages or whatever on it, of geology for investors. So it started off going over the NI 43-101, goes into different type of deposits, and really the things that you really have to know that make a difference on the economics of the project. Because that's something else as well, right? Like, what are the economics of each deposit? Like you just told me about porphyries. They can be huge. it takes money to find them. It takes money to build a mine around them. It takes money to do all of that. But economy of scale and a mine life of like 50 years oftentimes pays for that quickly. You have a CRD on top of that. The grade already pays for the build out of the mine. So you have to know all these things, and you're not necessarily going to know them if you only know the deposit. So deposits and geology for investors makes sense. That's what I found. It's literally geology for investors. That's what I found online. So yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, before you get into the geology, you should always research the less geological things. And then that way you can select 10 projects and bring it down to 5 that you actually want to spend your time, and then further look at the geology, right? So I wouldn't use geology as my first precursor. I would start off with more structural sense as the company structure and also the management and stuff first, and then kind of you can create your own criteria and kind of tick boxes and let it lead you in the right direction, right?
No, you're right. And I've been advertising my website a lot, but it's just these things just pop up. I have an education tab on my website as well, where I will just something that I watch online, like a course or whatever, that I find a free course. You find a lot of those on YouTube. I'll just save it, put it up on the website if I think that it has an influence on my investing as a retail natural resource investor. And so a course that I found on there was a course on human behavior, and from a university, long story. But so I think that also has an effect on your investing, like knowing people, knowing how people behave and all these things. I think that's a very important one too, as you just mentioned. And that's for any industry, really, not only the natural resource sector, but definitely natural resource sector. Because what was the thing that the Lundins or whoever said is like a mine is a pile of rocks with a liar on top or something like that, right? So you got to know the people, definitely. Yeah. Nick, it was a pleasure meeting you. Thank you for investing your time in me, sir. I hope we can stay in touch, and I hope for the next time we speak that you're at least a couple of steps closer to your dream. Thank you for your time, man.
Well, thanks for having me, and again, well, hopefully, COVID is all good here this summer. I'd like to have you up there, and you gotta get out there and hammer some rocks, man. That's what you gotta do. Then you'll be hooked pretty quick.
No, absolutely. That's definitely my plan. That's why Bob Moriarty tells me, he's visited like over 500 projects in his life, and I've never visited one. No, I have no idea what a mine looks like, right? So I definitely have to do it. Absolutely. Yeah. Really appreciate that, Nick. Thank you.